viewer, and welcome to another one of my tutorial videos. Today I'm going to be doing something slightly different. I usually do Blender videos. Today I'm going to be teaching you how to download, install, optimize, and use the Tixati torrent client. We're going to be downloading the client and then a few trial torrents. So let's get started. On the Tixati site, you'll click download, and that'll get you to this screen where you can find your specific per operating system ones. I have Windows 7 64-bit, so I'll get the 64-bit version. Here there's a bit about compatibility, upgrading from previous versions, and so on and so forth. Down here you'll find the 3 mirrors. It doesn't matter which one you choose, they'll all give you the same file. So we'll just give that a couple seconds to download. Beautiful, almost done there. So while it's doing its install, I think I'll compare it to the Azurus or Views client that has been a common choice in the past over Tixati, because it's slightly more advanced and has a more graphical user interface, although Tixati's is very powerful. So we'll go through. I've launched the installer and accepted it as a given it administrative privileges, which you'll have to do. It is safe. I've already done this, but it is required that you read these. Don't just click yes, continue the installation. Here we have the install options. So where to put it? I'm going to put it in my program files under Tixati. I'm going to make it the default handler for .torrent files and magnet links, which I will show you the difference of and how to use both of those later. And I will also set it as the DSC link handler. And I'll click install. So while it's doing this thing, let's just take a look at the Views client, which is an incredibly powerful client, although it does consume a large amount of RAM. While it's running, Views gives us DVD burning, built-in antivirus, and play downloads in progress under certain conditions for $29.90 a year. Tixati doesn't give us most. I think it does give some of these, like it somewhat integrates. I haven't used it in a while, the download still in progress with the use of the VLC media player, which I would highly recommend you get anyways. And DVD burning and antivirus I prefer to keep separate, but if you're into that thing, you might want to consider Views. It's a slightly more user-oriented or less experience-oriented client, and otherwise it doesn't do any of these things. It lets you handle that personally. So here we have the finished installation, and we'll launch it. Everything's on this screen. I have a dual screen for my convenience. Tixati gives you a license agreement, which once again you have to read and accept to use the software. And it gives you an initial configuration. So to save my downloads, I'm going to put it on my desktop for now, which you can always change later. The default port I recommend you leave as that, but if you know your firewall is blocking it and you have confirmed with your network administrator that it is okay for you to change this number, you can do that to get around any problems you might be having. Pick any real port, it doesn't really matter. Bandwidth throttling, unless you have certain limitations that you have to adhere to, don't touch that, but we'll look at that later. You can change all of these settings later. And check Tixati for updates. Yes, of course, because you want your software to stay up to date. Windows will come up with a firewall, or your personal firewall if you have an antivirus software installed. Will come up with this. Allow it access. You can use the public feature at your discretion. Here's another chance to open different types of file associations. By default, I'm giving Tixati all of my permissions. So we'll click OK there, and now we get to the client. This client is incredibly powerful, and let's start by going over some of the features that it has by downloading Ubuntu. I'm on the Ubuntu website, so this is a confirmed, safe file, I guess you'd call it, and I'm going to get the 64-bit version for desktop, and it's going to give me a .torrent file. If we view this in, you don't have to do that. Right here you can see the Tixati symbol. That means that when you click this, it'll open in Tixati. When we do click it, you'll see Tixati pops up with this, and it says the status becomes prompting user, and it's asking you what you want to do with this. So that file that we clicked is a .torrent file, and it contains the information that it has, that this file that you want to download contains Ubuntu 1.3.10 desktop AMD 64. And that's the only file within this torrent. If you get large photo packs, say, you will have hundreds of these, and you can choose to exclude them or include them, or change the priority to any of the levels given here, depending on, like, if you want, say, all the pictures from your vacation to be lower, or the pictures from your daughter's recital to be higher, you can prioritize that. So you can use also select all and move them all. We'll say normal for now, and we'll say start. So it'll initialize the files, and that could take a couple of minutes depending on how big the file is. Once it's done that, it'll start downloading them. So what initializing means is it's allocating the disk space. So if we go on to the desktop folder where I saved that, you can see here, my downloads folder, we have just the Ubuntu 1.3.10 file. And if I double click this right now, it would give me an error because this file is not even initialized yet, and it will take a long time to download because it's 900, almost a gigabyte. So while it's doing that, we can go back to this window and get Kubuntu. We'll get the 32-bit 13.10 image again, and you can see how small these files are. They're only a couple of kilobytes. We click on it again, and Tixati catches it, and it doesn't matter what priority you give it in relation to this, and I'll explain priorities once we start this, and these finish initializing. Okay, I said it when they're done initializing, but I lied. This one is at 21%, so the way it initializes files is it does one torrent at a time. So it'll do this to 100%, then start this one from 0 and bring it up. Another purpose of initialization is to try and locate if you've already downloaded a piece. So if I were to delete this right now, the initialization would start, or the torrent download would start with 1%. So you didn't have to re-download now, like that file again. So if we look at bandwidth, we'll use some of the graph features. You can see here, it maps out your incoming and outgoing bytes on nice charts, and it automatically adjusts. Over here you'll notice an always flat piece. This is actually a meter on the right hand side here, and that draws out a graph. It's a very nice and very powerful interface that it gives you. DHT, it can show you, if you know what these things do, all the statistics, IPv4, IPv6 peers, searches, and so on. And Tixati will teach you on its own its various features, such as this. For best download performance and importance, set the outgoing bandwidth to approximately 75% of the outgoing capacity, or active bandwidth auto limit feature. Click the bandwidth button. So what that's saying is to limit your outgoing bandwidth, and that I will show you in the optimization once I finish showing you how to manage all of these things. So now we've got 2 torrents downloading. I have a limited connection speed, as all people on this planet do, which is about 2 megabytes, or about 2,000 kilobytes per second, which means that I cannot download faster than that speed. So if I want to prioritize this file, I can right-click on it and give it a bandwidth priority group, which Views doesn't have. This is a very important feature that I look for. So if I put this one in the ultra-high priority pool, and I want to, it says that I have to add a bandwidth priority, which I haven't actually had to do yet. Hang on a sec. Right, so it actually told me how to do that. I just skipped by it. If you click bandwidth, you can see you can limit your incoming connection speed or your outgoing connection speed. And it is very important to balance these two to the correct ratio. The one I was using previously with the Xeris or Views was 2,000 kilobytes per second, or whatever I could get out of here, to 45. So I'm going to apply that limit now, even though that won't actually make a difference down here because I don't have enough other people interested in downloading this file to meet that requirement. And the torrent system kind of has a hole for this because there are some people with ludicrous seeding systems that are able to just crank out ridiculously high output rates, making people like me unable to match it. So you might have to download some poorly seeded torrents and kind of cheat the system. It doesn't always work, but you know, what are you going to do? Right now it's working pretty well. I'm getting some high speeds, so it should let me prioritize them now. No, I have to set my download. Okay, incoming I'm going to limit to, let's say I want to do some browsing in the background. I'm actually going to limit, you can see it down here, trying to cut it down. I'm going to limit it to 500 kilobytes per second. And it'll show you there in brackets your limited speed and its actual speed. So it's trying to get more pieces coming back in. And now it'll strategically transfer or share that bandwidth. So this one has the ultra high priority group, or is in the ultra high, and this one is in the very high. So if we pull that down to normal, you'll notice even more of the bandwidth speed allocated to this torrent. But we don't need that. We're just going to open it up. With this one, you still want to have a limiter, especially if you have a lot of torrents downloading at once that can outpace your upload speed. Like, that'll do more than what your internet connection will handle. My internet connection will handle approximately 50 kilobytes per second, maybe 60. So I want to limit it below that step. Otherwise, what happens is the torrent client will completely fill up that kind of thing. Think of the internet, your internet capacity as a pipe, as a space. So your torrent client will fill up that space with outgoing information to other people, and it will not have enough room to fit in requests for pieces that you want. So work with that. You'll have to mess around with the numbers. Some increase them, decrease some. I can't give you all the speeds because everyone's internet connection is different. I'm using 45 to 2000. Do whatever works for you. It's a logarithmic relationship. So if you have, say, 200 kilobytes per second, you might get away with 5 or 10 upload. Whereas if you're going to ridiculous speeds, just open it up and you shouldn't have too much of a problem with that. Let's look at magnet links. A lot of people are very interested in kick-ass torrents. Now, I do have to warn you, there are plenty of illegal files on here that you have to be careful of because they are illegal. So let's look for Backtrack, which is another operating system. Not Backtrack. Backtrack. An operating system designed for penetration testing. It's Unix based and it is open source. If you go to this website here, you'll see it's already been released. It is free to download, and you can take loads off servers by getting these versions. It isn't confirmed as being an official Backtrack file, but, you know, what are you going to do? We'll download that, and we'll get this. But we said we're going to use magnet links, so we're not going to use that. We're going to use this little thing right here. And that's essentially the same thing as downloading one of these. It's slightly different. It has to get meta info. So it'll actually download. This is the number that it gives you. That's the torrent's ID, I guess you'd call it. If you were to copy it and Google it, you would get back to this file. So once it's fetched the meta info, it'll directly add it, and it won't give you the option to do all the downloading configurations that we had with the other two operating systems. It'll jump right into downloading. Managing torrents, you can stop them by shift selecting them or just selecting them one by one. You can remove them. That'll completely either delete or just remove them and keep the files in place. Oh, I was wrong. It does give you the option. Another thing you can do here is you can name them. So if I wanted to call this, instead of BTR, whatever, I'd say Backtrack 5 R3. And then if I go back to my downloads folder on my desktop, you'll see here is the folder because it has numerous files. We'll get into that menu in a minute. Folder Backtrack, which is now the name that I gave it, as opposed to the torrent's name, which it was BTR. Yeah, whatever. So now that we're down here, we'll go into Backtracks. It's still initializing. Alright, we'll start this one again. So it does a quick file check for integrity, and then starts downloading. So You can see here each torrent's independent speed in and out. Those are some fairly decent speeds. So you'll see here all these views. So this is a progress bar. It is completely black, where it has like the percentages, the percentage that it is complete, and white the percentage that it is incomplete. And this is a piece graph. This is a very important and useful tool that can be used for determining what pieces of the file you've downloaded. So if you have a photo collection and you've prioritized, say, photos 1 through 100, and they're at the beginning of the torrent, you'll see this will be a darker color like it is in here. Every one of these means a piece of the torrent is downloaded, which is how torrents work. And if you're more interested in that, I Google it, because that's not what this tutorial is about, but that's where to find that in Tixati. This one is the similar chart, only it shows what is available. Here you see 44 available copies. If this number is less than 1, say 0.64, you will not be able to download the file. If it's above, the higher this number is, the faster your potential speed is, but once again, it cannot exceed your internet's maximum speed. In files, we only have one file in this torrent, whereas with the backtrack one, we have numerous files, which we'll use later. Here you have another smaller piece graph that's slightly less accurate, but it is dependent on each file, and a progress bar on the top. The trackers just gives tracker information that's complicated torrent stuff that, if you're interested in, I suggest you Google. The peers are the people that are sending it to you, and Tixati gives you the country flag. If you hover over it, it'll tell you what flag it is in case you aren't a geographer, and whether your connection is encrypted, how it was established, and various things like that. For example, incoming or outgoing. No, that's this one. How it was established, and a whole bunch of torrent information that you might be looking for, but chances are if you know what that is, you'll know how to find it. These ones are independent pieces that are being sent. So as we said over here, each of these pieces is represented by a white line, and this would be a white line, and a complete one, once it disappears, would be a gray line. A per torrent bandwidth graph with different colors. I'll show you color customization in a minute, because there's tons of that. An event log to say for, what went wrong. Some general quick options for the torrent, and comments that you can probably even edit yourself, which we'll leave. Let's go into colors, because everyone likes colors. So first thing you see when you click settings is color scheme. Come back here. Silly settings. So there's some generic ones that you can pop off to. You can get colors, custom ones that you can probably download off the internet, or you can do them yourself. Here's some generic ones, or you can use an RBG color picker, which is probably a lot more complicated than I'm going to make it, but screw that. As you can see here, you've got lots and lots of options, then you can customize each one. Chances are, if you're going to be doing that, you'll know what you're doing, so I won't have to tell you. Fonts, widget behaviors, outputting, interface, lots of useful stuff. Let's go into optimization. Incoming ports. You'll want to leave the ports alone unless you're having problems with those ports, in which case just pick, stuff like that. It's complicated. Timey-wimey stuff. You're probably going to prefer encryption, because this world is going everything is going encrypted. You don't want to select encrypted only, and I say yet because we still have about 10 years before that's a standard. FBI. Encrypted preferred is, of course, your ideal choice, because it doesn't matter, and you wouldn't want to say unencrypted only, because that'll ruin options in the future. Incoming peer connections, you can say, accept either. It doesn't matter. You can't choose, because they're, beggars can't be choosers. That type of thing. Outgoing peer connection, you prefer UDP or TCP. UDP is user, I don't know what they stand for. TCP, actually, I do prefer, because they are, it's a better protocol for torrents, because it's less lossy. hang on a sec. Alright, did a bit of Googling. TCP over UDP is very dependent on how advanced of a user you are. If you're into a lot of managing UDP and absolute extreme overclocking, I guess you'd call it, of your torrent client, you'll know what to do. Otherwise, just leave them as TCP and you'll get no errors. Maximum pure connections per transfer. The higher you set this, the more RAM Tixati will use, but the higher your chance of speed is. Chances are you won't need it more than what they have it set to by default. And everything else don't mess with. No touchy. Transfers. Here comes a large amount of Tixati's power and a lot of torrent power, so I'll get into that once I explain this. Local files, just in case you want to change your download location, and a bunch of other useful, powerful tools. Some default trackers if you want to use those. Chances are if you're touching this, you'll know what you're doing. Otherwise, don't touch it. And meta info, if you know what you're doing, you can do that, and otherwise, don't touch it. So let's get into this. Your maximum download and upload slots. Right now, all of these are considered downloads because they're not done. Ubuntu had finished, but I went into the downloads and I deleted that file. So you can see here where there was before Ubuntu, there is no more. Dun dun dun. So that I can get 3 of these working for downloading. And I will show you what that is. So let's say instead of 4 download slots, we're going to make it 2. And that is the maximum amount of files that can be downloaded simultaneously. And we have a problem because there are 3. So we'll minimize, or we'll just drag this over here, and we'll start all 3 of them at once by selecting them and clicking start. Now this one doesn't start by default because it's missing, so I right click on it and I can say force check. And what this does is it reinitializes the files, but it's not doing it. And that's because we have our download slot set to 2. If we set this to 3, we will immediately get that torrent to start. Like that. And it'll reinitialize Ubuntu. I think initialization surpasses download slots, but if we pop this down to 2, hit enter to apply, it's, yeah, I guess it does. Time warp. I am the doctor, that's why I can do that. So now we have our download slots set to 2. And we have 3 files trying to download. And it's working. Why is it working? Strange. Maybe I have to restart to apply. It should queue them. Maybe it is. But it's not. I don't know. Screw queuing. That's pretty much all there is to Tixati for the average user to get yourself downloading. If you want to add a torrent manually, you can click add here and find it in your computer. You can open a magnet link, or you can create a new seed. If you know what that does, use it. Otherwise, don't. I don't know if Tixati can create torrents. You probably can. Let's see. That might be this one. Yes. So let's say I want to create a torrent of my photo collection. I will find that under my backups, Cuba photos. So I'll just say OK, and it finds 75 files. And piece size, it'll get that automatically, so don't mess with it, because that's actually pretty good. Set a private flag, because it is a private torrent, and I can say create. And it'll check for those files, it'll index them, and create that little torrent file that I told you about later, which you can send to your family, and if they have a Tixati client, they can then download these torrents or these files from you, and this is especially useful if you have massive, massive file collections. Say you have 3 terabytes of photos that you want to send to a family member. You wouldn't do that using like a file hosting service online. You could use this. So now I think it should have put that onto, or that torrent file. No, it didn't. That's a shame. Where'd you put it? Maybe under downloads. Nope, not there either. Meta info. Save torrent. Okay, so then I can put that onto my desktop, and then if we look here on the desktop, you can see that, which you can then add. Right now it's opening in Azirus, but we're not going to launch Azirus because that'll create a lot of confusion. And that's how to create your own torrent. Then you would send that little mini file to your friends and family, and they could open it using their Tixati and download their torrents. I hope you enjoyed my tutorial today. Please leave any helpful hints or constructive criticism in the comments. Try not to be too mean. I'm fairly new to this. And live well. Live long and prosper.